Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to explore one of the most fascinating figures in English history, Alfred the Great. He's the only English monarch to be called the Great. But what exactly made Alfred so? Well, great? It's not just that he was a warrior king, or a lawgiver, or a patron of learning. It's that he was all of those things and more. He changed the trajectory of England at a time when it was on the verge of being wiped off the map. Let's rewind to the 9th century. England wasn't a single kingdom like it is today. It was divided into several smaller Anglo-Saxon kingdoms: Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia, each with its own ruler. Alfred was born in 849 into the royal family of Wessex, the youngest of 5 sons of King Ethelwulf. Being the youngest, Alfred was never expected to be king. But due to a tragic sequence of deaths, his father and 4 older brothers, Alfred eventually inherited the crown in 871 at just 22 years old. Now imagine stepping into power at that age, young, untested, and suddenly responsible for defending your kingdom from one of the most relentless forces of the era, the Vikings. The Viking threat in the late 800s wasn't just about raids on monasteries and coastal towns. This was full-scale invasion. By the time Alfred came to power, Viking armies had already overrun most of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Only Wessex remained, and even it seemed like it wouldn't last much longer. Just a few years into his reign, Alfred suffered a major blow. In 878, the Vikings launched a surprise attack during the winter, and Alfred was forced into hiding in the Marshes of Somerset. His kingdom had collapsed. He was reduced to living in secrecy, rallying a small band of loyal followers. This is where the famous story comes from. Alfred, disguised and hiding in a peasant's hut, was so lost in thought about his kingdom that he accidentally burned the cakes he was supposed to be watching. A charming legend, yes, but also a symbol of humility, resilience, and focus during hardship. But Alfred wasn't done. From those marshes, he regrouped. He forged alliances. He raised an army. And in the spring of 878, he led his forces into the Battle of Edington, a decisive and dramatic victory against the Viking leader Guthrum. This wasn't just a win, it was a turning point. After the battle, Alfred negotiated the Treaty of Wedmore, securing peace with the Vikings. Guthrum converted to Christianity and withdrew to rule over East Anglia, now part of the area and known as the Danelaw, Viking-controlled territory in eastern England. Wessex was safe for now. But Alfred knew that peace wouldn't last unless he changed the very foundation of his kingdom. So what did he do? First, he restructured the military. Alfred realized that Wessex couldn't keep playing defense every time the Vikings launched an attack. He created a system of burhs, fortified towns built across the kingdom, strategically placed no more than 20 to 30 miles apart. These weren't just forts. They became economic centers, military outposts, and places of refuge. He even built roads, known as here paths, connecting them for faster troop movements. It was a kind of medieval emergency response system. Next came the Navy. Alfred is often called the father of the English Navy. He personally designed ships that were longer, faster, and more stable than traditional Viking vessels. These weren't perfect. They were hard to maneuver in shallow waters. But it marked the beginning of a naval tradition that would one day define Britain's power. But Alfred wasn't just a warrior king. In fact, he once said, "What I desire most is to leave to those who come after me a memory of good works." And that's exactly what he did. He turned his attention to education and literacy, something unheard of for most rulers of the time. He was deeply concerned that the knowledge of the past, religious, legal, and cultural, was being lost. So he launched an educational revival. He invited scholars from across the British Isles and even from Europe to his court. He established a school for noble boys, possibly even including commoners, to learn Latin and English. And Alfred didn't just encourage learning. He led by example. He personally translated several key texts from Latin into Old English so that more of his people could understand them. This included works like Pastoral Care by Pope Gregory, The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius, and The History of the World by Orosius. These weren't light reading. They were philosophical, theological and historical texts, tools to educate not just individuals but a society. One of his most enduring contributions was commissioning the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a written history of the English people that was continued by monks for over 2 centuries. Without this chronicle, much of what we know about early medieval England would have been lost forever. Then there was law and justice. Alfred compiled a legal code that became known as the Doom Book. It wasn't just a random collection of laws. It was a thoughtful synthesis of earlier Saxon law, Mosaic law from the Bible, and Christian ethics. It emphasized fairness, protection of the vulnerable, and the idea that justice must be rooted in morality, not just authority. But perhaps the most revolutionary thing about Alfred's rule was his vision. He didn't see himself as just a king of Wessex. He saw himself as a king of the English people. In 886, when he retook and fortified London, he began using the title King of the Anglo-Saxons. It was the first real step toward a unified England, even though that vision wouldn't be fully realized until after his death. Alfred ruled for 28 years and died in 899. He was succeeded by his son Edward the Elder, and eventually his grandson, Athelstan, who would become the first king of a truly united England. But make no mistake, Alfred laid the groundwork. Without his leadership, his reforms, and his vision, England may not have survived the Viking Age. And even if it had, it would have been a very different place. Let's be clear, Alfred wasn't perfect. Some of his naval innovations failed. Some of his reforms faced resistance. But greatness isn't about perfection. It's about perseverance, vision, and transformation. Alfred didn't just react to his time, he reshaped it. So, what made Alfred the Great so great? He held the line when no one else could. He turned a failing kingdom into a model of resilience. He combined military innovation, legal reform, cultural revival, and educational leadership in a way no other ruler of his era had done. He wasn't just a king, he was a rebuilder, a scholar, a strategist, and a nation-maker. And in a time of darkness and invasion, Alfred lit a path forward, not just for Wessex, but for what would eventually become England. Thanks for watching. If you found Alfred's story inspiring or eye-opening, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment below. Which part of Alfred's legacy do you think had the biggest impact? Military, education, or law? Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring history, and remember, even in the darkest times, great leadership can change the course of a nation.